Welcome to our Sunday follow-up for June 23rd, proper 7, otherwise known as the 5th Sunday after Pentecost. Trinity, right? And then 4 more, so that's 5th. So we are the 4th Sunday after Whit Sunday. No, 5th Sunday after Whit Sunday. Whit Sunday is Pentecost, and 4th Sunday after Trinity. And our lessons are Job 38, 2 Corinthians 6, and Mark chapter 4, continuation of last week. And as last week we found that connection between them all, this week there's a slight connection between them all. 2 Corinthians 6 doesn't quite have the real strong connection. Maybe it does in a slightly different way than you would think, but we're just going to go through these in order. Job, 2 Corinthians, and end on Mark, which is what I preached on. Again, we are live on Kick on Sunday afternoons. This is a late one. And then we upload these immediately following that to the YouTube channel. So if you like, comment, subscribe, share, ask me any questions you want. All right, we're going to Job chapter 38. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man." So again, dress like a man. Actually stand up and present yourself like an actual man. Man up. Take on that type of appearance, right? Dress for action. Strap on your sword and get ready for battle, right? That's what I want you to do. I'll ask you questions and you make them known to me, right? That's what God's doing. He's calling him out to the fore. Who is this weak imbecile that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Who is this that's coming at me? The Lord is calling you out. That's exactly the passage, and it's just phenomenal to think that Job is finally getting called out on some of his garbage. But it's mainly his philosophizing with his friends that he's really getting called out for. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you must know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were the bases sunk? Or who laid the cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Right? So he's talking about creation, and obviously the morning stars that sang should be an allusion to either angels or stars in heaven. And again, the stars in heaven are also associated with angels. So, and the sons of God shouting for joy would also, again, probably be connected to angels. And this goes into the Genesis thing, whether the sons of men and daughters of God, or daughters of men and sons of God, getting together, is that a way of saying that angels and humans were having sexual relations? Well, angels don't have sexual relations. Angels don't procreate, according to Jesus. So, probably not that. But here, creation, right? Creation happens. Creation takes place. Who measured it? Where were bases sunk? Surely you must know, you wise person. I mean, this is the big thing with the Big Bang and even the idea of talking about glacial flows and the development of the planetary structure. It's like they know a lot in some sense of how Earth is reformed, or how things can be changed. They don't necessarily know how does the thing become, right? And so if you have this ball, let's just say that it's a collection of random matter, right, that gets together, right? How does that matter then develop certain structures in it, so that the molecules form in the right way to create the different structures that are necessary to have a landmass, rather than just this big glob of cells, or it's not really cells, molecules, right? And then to be able to develop how that is then structured and flowed. And then why would water be created? I mean, that's even one of the biggest things of oxygen, hydrogen coming together and not deciding that it should cause an explosion. I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a chemist. I don't know all this stuff. But I know enough that it doesn't make sense that it happens randomly to me. Or who shut in the sea with the doors when it burst out from the womb? Right? When I made the clouds the garments, and thick darkness the swaddling bands. The idea of atmosphere, right? The clouds in the sky, and then the bands beyond that are the darkness of space, right? And prescribed limits for these things. Set bars and doors so that they don't cross, right? Why does the sea not become and just part of the sky? And why does it not just flow upwards into it? Well, you're going to say gravity. But who set the parameters on gravity? Right? Who determined the water mass of a molecule? Who determined the basics of how the water stays up there, or how much water should stay up there in order to form clouds, in order to be in the right saturation rate so that it would rain periodically, right? And then who set the upper limits so that it doesn't just continue on as atmospheric sky, but the bounds? And of course, then you're going to talk again about gravity and gravitational fields and stuff like that. But there's limits to that stuff. And why are those limits the way they are? Who decided that that was the limit? Or why is it specifically that limit here versus other limits elsewhere? And how much of a difference? I mean, this is always the thing, is you take a movie, simple movie, like I think it was Bruce Almighty, where he decides to lasso in the moon, right? And what happens when you lasso and pull the moon closer? Well, the tides rise and he floods out places, right? There's consequences for stuff like that. If the moon isn't the prescribed distance from the Earth, right, all the tides of the planet could change, right? If the moon is too close, or if the moon goes further away, then what happens? The tides are drawn down, right? So if there was a way we could just rocket the moon further away, we could have lower tides, right? Well, how does that work with the mass of the water? Right? How does that make sense? Right? If there's only so much water that can fit in the ocean, otherwise it causes the oceans to rise. Well, how does bringing the moon closer or moving the moon further away really affect the tides when we know that there's a causation there? But who prescribed these limits? Who set the bars? Who made it the right measurement so that it works? Answer, you didn't. Other answer, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thus far shall you come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. Right? This is all about the God pointing to his creative power. And this is where, I sit down with people and there's so many different things, but your God is what you fear, love, and trust in above all things. But the main job description for God, the main job description for the Almighty, for the omnipotent being that we call God and we recognize as God, and even if you don't want to recognize it as God, one of the main criteria in being the Almighty is creator. The creator of all things. The creator and not the created. This is where so many pantheons of gods fail. Because they're not creators of anything. If anything, they're like manipulators, or they're fashioners, or they're molders, right? It's like you can take a rock, an iron, we'll go specifically with something about iron, right? I can take iron ore and make it into an iron rod, right? It'll take me a lot of time, and I probably won't be the best person to have done it, but could I do it? Yeah, you can fashion stuff out of stuff. But the real definition of Almighty and God is to fashion stuff out of nothing, to be able to just iron rod, right? And that's a part of even what magic tries to do, the understanding of magic. Magic is really about being able to try and contrive something out of nothing. But most even things, when we think of magic, when we think of magical things or magical devices or magical auras, we really go into the idea that they need some kind of component structure that I'm going to create into something, or I'm going to fashion or mold stone into something, right? Or I'm going to use this little magic device of a wand or something and make something happen, right? It uses materials to do something. But that's not the power of God. The power of God is doing something, creating something out of nothing. And that's really what he's going for here, is to be able to say, who do you think you are? I created this out of nothing. I didn't need to do experiments and calculations and all this stuff to figure it out. I just did it because I can. And you know what? It works because I didn't just make the object, but I made the physics of the object. I made the chemical composition and the chemical equations of the object. Why does your chemistry work? Because God ordered it as such, right? That's really I'm going to lay it down type thing that God is going for with Job. Your philosophy and everything else, how does it work? Why does it work? Well, it works because I said it works. I made it work. And no, I'm not talking for me. I didn't do it. But that's what God is recounting to Job in this passage of creation, right? Your philosophy, your reason, your senses, the world in which you live in, the physics that makes it up, the rational aspect of it only exists because God made it so. And God determined all of those things limits, right? We then try and diagnose what are the limits? What are the distances? What are the ways in which this works? And the more you find equations that work to be able to orchestrate how these things work, the more it just goes into the fascination and the glory of God. It doesn't take away from God. That's what people are missing. Oh, well, that was a very long diatribe on this passage from Job, where, again, the Lord is just coming back at Job and all of his complaints and just recognizing, hey, I'm the one who made all these things. I'm the one who's done all these things. Don't complain about me. I got a plan, and don't worry, I love you. That's what he eventually gets to, and then he restores him like eightfold from what he lost, which is just an amazing ending of a book, right? You start off with a guy that's rich beyond ideas, and then you end the book with, oh, and remember all that stuff you lost? Here, have more, right? It's like, you did good. All right. 2 Corinthians chapter 6. So again, the creation aspect is going to go well with Jesus calming the storm in Mark chapter 4. But 2 Corinthians chapter 6 is going to take us on a little different variant. Working together with him, I'm assuming this is with Jesus or God, then we appeal to you not to receive the grace of God in vain. Right? So we're working with God so that you would not receive this grace in vain. For he says, in a favorable time I listened to you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. Right? And so this is, of course, if this is Jesus, recognizing that Jesus hears our prayers, hears the things that we want and desires, and on the day of our salvation, he will actually help us. Help us with salvation. This isn't help us put more money in our bank or help us to make magic iron rods. No, this is help us in the day of salvation. Now behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Right? And so salvation isn't just about the day in the future or the day of the Lord or the end times. But salvation is about each and every day that we have in faith, right? The fact that I am saved by the grace of God goes to be, I am saved. Not, I will be saved on the last day. No, I am saved. I am forgiven. It's not, I will be forgiven on the last day. No, it's a presently thing happening. That's what salvation is. So, we put no obstacle in anyone's way, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. So this is again St. Paul trying to remind them, the Corinthians, that we're not trying to put things in your way. We're not trying to make obstacles or hoops for you to jump through to get into the ministry. But as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way by great endurance in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, hunger, by purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, the Holy Spirit, genuine love, by truthful speech, by the power of God, by the weapons of righteousness in your right hand and your left hand. Right? So what he's setting up is that we're not putting obstacles in anyone's way for salvation. It's not our fault. It's not a fault to be found with St. Paul's ministry. But here's the thing. As servants of God, we commend ourselves because we have done these things. Right? So in some sense, these are the hoops that you're going to jump through, but don't think of them as obstacles, right? Think of them as great things that you have endured for the faith. Great endurance. Great things that we have endured for the faith. Afflictions. The 40 minus 1 lashings, right? Shipwrecked, so forth. Hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, right? Excuse me. But these are the things that stop that. These are the things that are not obstacles, but just in my perspective, right? I'm going to view these as obstacles. An obstacle for me being a servant of God is sleepless nights, right? I don't want to have sleepless nights. An obstacle for me being a servant of God is hunger, right? I could probably use a couple of days of being hungry. But I don't. Why don't I? Because it's not something that I have to face. And I don't want to face it unless I have to face it. Right? Beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors. Thankfully, I don't have to face a lot of those things. Right? You don't want to face these things. You don't have to face these things. But at the same time, these are probably things that you're going to end up facing. Right? You're going to end up having to be pure. Right? Purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, genuine love, right? You should do these things. And then he goes into the contrasting list, right? After he goes through the weapons of righteousness for your right hand and for your left hand. Because then you get into through honor, right? And dishonor. Through slander and praise. We are treated as impostors and yet are true. As unknown and yet well known. Dying and behold we're alive. Right? Punished and yet not killed. Right? So, these are other things that you're going to face as a servant of God. And these are things to, again, you can in some sense take joy in. Right? You can commend yourself because guess what? I've suffered by people calling me an imposter. I've suffered by people not knowing who I am. Even though I'm not known. Nobody should know who I am. I'm least of the least. But I always love it when somebody calls me and they're just like, hey, we got this new book series by such and such. Of course you've heard of him from this and this. And I'm just like, I don't have any clue who you're talking about. So, bye. As punished and yet not killed. As sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. As poor and yet making many rich. Again, whether it's monetarily rich or rich in faith, I don't know. As having nothing and yet possessing everything. See, that emphasizes the poor and the rich is probably actual monetarily poor and monetarily rich. Not just faith. We have spoken freely to you. Corinthians. Our heart is opened wide. You are not restricted by us, but you are restricted in your own affections. Right? And so this goes back to, these are not obstacles. These are not stumbling blocks. These are not things that the church puts in your way, but these are just simply what it means to live that life. So don't think of them as restrictions or things you must achieve, but rather think of them, you are restricted in your own affections. Think of them as your own affections. The various things that you get to take. The various things that you get to do as a child of God. In return, widen your heart also, right? And I speak to you as little children because, of course, you don't know any better. It's just part of my philosophy with most of the New Testament is not deep theological stuff. It's actually very surface level theological stuff because they're dealing with people that don't know enough deep philosophical stuff for them to comprehend it. So, yeah. So this is basically just a list of, there's a lot of hardships that go with being a Christian. There's a lot of hardships that go with being a minister of God. There's a lot of hardships with following Christ. And get used to it. Because guess what? They're not going to change. Jesus isn't just going to say, peace, be still, and all of your problems and all of your turmoil are going to go away. Wow, that almost makes it like there's a connection between the epistle lesson and the gospel lesson. Like they actually make sense together. No. All right. Mark chapter 4. On that day, so this is the same day he was just telling the parables, when it had come evening, he said, let us go across to the other side in a boat. So he left the crowds, he got into a boat. There were other boats with him. Great windstorm comes upon the lake, probably the Sea of Galilee. The waves are breaking into or onto or just through the boat. So the boats are being filled with water. Yeah, that's your only real allusion to the fact that the boats are sinking, right? Otherwise, bad windstorm, waves come over the side of the boat. Okay, boats are already filling, right? Maybe that's a little worse. It's not like some of the other ones where they're like bailing water to the extent of the boat's half sunk, right? Jesus is in the stern, the back of the boat, and asleep on a cushion. Just nice, resting, sleeping. I mean, he'd been working all day. What do you expect him to do? Sleep. Yeah. So they go and woke him. They awoke him, right? And said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Do you not care that we are being destroyed? That our boat is breaking apart? See, and that makes them more intense. So he awoke, he rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Peace, be still. Wind ceased, great calm over the lake. Perfect. Great. Now we got to row. What? You didn't want to row before? Not the point. So he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Right? They're in the storm. What's the worst that can happen? Right? They're not going to drown. Right? I mean, I guess, have a little forethought right there with Paul being shipwrecked on the island of Malta. Right? We know these things. That's bad. So, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the seas obey him? Well, who is this? Who is the one that is obeyed by the wind and the seas? God. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Holy Trinity. So who is this? This is Jesus, who's saying these things so that they can hear it. So it is Jesus who told them to go out on the water. When there's a great windstorm, he's asleep. They think they're going to die. He tells them, no, you're not going to die. Why are you thinking that you're going to die? And they're like, well, who in the world is this guy? Well, he's God. He's the creator of the wind and the wave. That's the point. This text really isn't that deep. This is one of my problems in some sense with this, is that there really isn't a depth to dive too much into this, right? I went and I dove into the idea of, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And taking that as a leap to be able to go into, does God care about you? Does God care about me? Does God care about anyone in his philosophy? Right? That's not the point of this text, right? Because the care is associated with faith. Do you not believe in me? Do you not have faith that I care about you? Do you not have love for me as I have love for you? Right? Wouldn't the easier answer be, hey, Lord, do you love me? Save me. And then lay down on the cushion next to him. Right? You could do that, but it's not the same thing. This goes into our egos and our desires to make the world perfect for us. Right? We want to have the perfect world for us so that everything goes my way. But once we live in a world with others, then we have to live in a world where things should be at least good for them, if they're not good for us. Then you have to live in a world of sacrifice. You have to live in a world where you're willing to give things up for your neighbor. And that's the world we live in. That's a world of peace. Yeah. Well, realistically, like I said, I don't have a whole lot more. Job reminds us that God is God and you're not. 2 Corinthians reminds us that we're going to suffer trials for being Christians. They're not obstacles or hoops to jump through to become Christians. They're just simply a result of being Christian. And then the gospel lesson in Mark chapter 4 is Jesus being at peace and peaceful and quiet versus everybody else so worried and anxious about everything, and they just need to calm down. And so he calms down the wind and the seas, and then he calms down the disciples, right? Why are you so afraid? Don't be afraid. Don't think that you're dying, right? Rejoice in the fact that of the good things that happened today and that you're still alive. Be still and know God. So that is our Sunday follow-up for June 23rd, the 5th Sunday after Pentecost. That's it. Thank you very much. Again, we're live on Kick on Sunday afternoons. Generally, I try and start at 1. I did have devotions today, so that's why I'm late. And then we upload these later to YouTube. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat below, and I will do my best to answer them. God's blessings. Have a great week.